The Maple Leafs visit Mitch Marner and the Golden Knights tonight, and the trade winds are blowing in Toronto. We got a 5-pack of players for you to keep an eye on. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Thank you for making the Locked On Leafs podcast part of your daily listening routine. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast to do so. Put that in the rotation. We got brand new episodes coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. What's happening, Dave? Today's a big day in Leafland. A really big day. You excited?
Yeah, I mean, considering we're all going to be bunkered into our houses probably for the next little bit, it's a pretty good, probably a good night to watch a little, watch a very highly anticipated game. I think it kind of snuck up a little bit on people. I'm not going to lie.
Well, I mean,
this one circled.
Well, they did when the schedule first came out, right? This is one of the games that when the schedule drops, you're like, okay, when do the Leafs play Vegas, right? When's Marner back in Toronto? Now, him coming to Toronto, that'll happen next week, but the Leafs traveling to Vegas for the first time this season. So this will be the first time that the Maple Leafs and Mitch Marner will go head-to-head. So I think I'm very excited to see how this kind of plays out because, I mean, obviously there was a lot that went into the decision for Mitch Marner to leave Toronto. And, you know, I would say that, like, it's been, you know, they've had success. We'll call it that. And he's starting to heat up a little bit. I was checking his numbers. He's got 7 points his last 5 games, 3 multi-point games over his last 5. So he's starting to pick it up, scored a goal in their win last night against the Kings. But he's got 47 points so far on the season through, I think, 45 or 46 games. So he's operating at point per game, just a little lower, I think, than we're used to for Mitch Marner, who's usually hovering around 100 points. But he always is a guy who starts to heat up in January. I do remember, you know, a few years there where it's like, yeah, hovering around a point per game, and then January pops off, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, he's picking it up. He's been one of the better players over the last, you know, final few months of the season. What are you anticipating out of Mitch Marner tonight in his first game against Toronto?
Honestly, I do think that there's going to be some semblance of him looking to show what he can do. I mean, it's going to be a little bit different, right? He's playing center now. That's something he didn't really do a lot in Toronto. I don't even really think he ever really played center in Toronto. So like that's a new experience for him. I do think that there's you know, there's gonna be I think a bit of awkwardness too, but with it as well, just kind of I'm sure there's gonna be some exchanges on the ice, depending on who he's playing up against. But yeah, no, I think it's gonna be weird. It's gonna be weird. I think that's probably the best way to kind of describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be very weird, obviously, for the Maple Leafs. Looking and seeing that guy on the other side of the ice, not in a Leaf uniform for the first time, in like an actual game, it is going to be bizarre. And you know there's going to be some fun, you know, jabbing between him and Willie, him and Matthews. Like, I'd imagine him and Matthews will get the assignment against one another. No, like just for like to at least start the game. Like, I would imagine that those two would like to go up against each other. I think that'd be kind of a fun little start to the game if both coaches kind of make that happen. You know, Marner's starting the game. Like, that's, you know, if there's gonna be money on the board, like he's gonna want to start that hockey game, and I'd imagine that Berube will respond with the Matthews line up against him. So I'm excited to see what those two can do. You know, what they'll be able to kind of conjure up when they can maybe fuel each other by facing off. against each other for the first time this season. But I tell you what I'm expecting something a little different out of Mitch Marner tonight specifically. I'm expecting a little feistiness out of Mitch Marner tonight. I think this is an opportunity for Marner just to be petty as all petty can be, petty AF as they say, and just like get into the mix, start face washing guys, and start getting into getting into some scrums and starting to do a little bit of the rough stuff between the whistles. Like, how hilarious would that be for Mitch Marner to troll Leafs Nation by doing all of the things that Leafs Nation had asked him to do for years, and then going ahead and doing in his first game against Toronto? I could see him trolling Leafs Nation like that and having a little more pep in his step to do those types of things tonight. Can't you?
I can. No, I definitely can. They asked him, I think, after the game in LA, if they thought how much he thought about playing against Toronto and then the eventual return to Toronto. He's like, I haven't really thought about it that much, and I'm like, that is that's a classic Mitch Marner answer right there.
Yeah.
You know that this was circled on the calendar. You know that I'm sure so many people were anticipating this game for a long time within the Marner camp as well.
Oh, 100%. 100%. They had this one circled and next week circled as well. Just like all of us fans, are looking forward to these games. So are they, because they've got a lot to prove as well. And he's got a lot to prove to Leafs Nation. And not that, Leafs Nation drove him out of the city. I'm not, blaming the fan base for that because he chose to leave himself. But, the word, his parting words and stories that he was sharing upon exiting the city, kind of felt like there was, he was giving some shots to the fan base. So there's going to be some animosity. It'll be a lot worse next week. I will be curious to see the ratio of like cheers to boos. Obviously in Vegas tonight, so it doesn't matter. They're clearly going to cheer him, probably a little extra loud tonight if he makes a play. But next week, I am curious to see, if the boo birds outweigh the cheers for Mitch Marner. Okay, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll get into the matchup tonight. The teams, Vegas, they've won 5 in a row. They are red hot. The Maple Leafs coming off a stinker in Utah. What do we expect out of tonight? We'll get into that. And Dave has his 5-player trade list for the Maple Leafs. 5 defensemen to watch that the Maple Leafs could have some interest in ahead of the trade deadline. Those are coming up next in the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by Indeed. If you ever thought about hiring someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want the right candidates to truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored job posts put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs helps your posts get right up to the top, and they help you find the person that's the best match for your role, and it really does make a difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed were 90% more likely to hire a person than a non-sponsored job. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listen to this show. You get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. Brand new episodes of the Locked On Leafs podcast coming to you wherever you find your podcast. And you can watch the video form of the podcast up on YouTube as well. Hit subscribe and get that daily dose of Maple Leafs content. And if you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. Click the link in the description down below for more information and join our team's community. So a big game tonight, one that a lot of us have been waiting for. The Maple Leafs continuing their West Coast road trip. Big win in Colorado, disappointing loss in Utah. Now they got the Vegas Golden Knights, who did play last night. So it's kind of a role reversal from the other night where the Leafs were on the second half of back-to-back and Utah was waiting around. And they got a Leafs team who's tired. Vegas, they played last night. I think that game went to overtime too, if I'm not mistaken, against LA. So a little bit of extra hockey as well for the Golden Knights in a tough divisional match. And then they now travel back from LA to Vegas. Quick flight, but they've got the Toronto Maple Leafs in town here. What are you anticipating in this game here tonight, Dave?
I mean, the Leafs have had ups and downs in Vegas. They've had good games in Vegas, and they've had some not so good games in Vegas. This is kind of a big opportunity for the Leafs to understand how big this game is. And, I think a bad taste in your mouth from the last game as well. But at the same time, Vegas is going to be like, this is a Leafs team that's, that can be a little vulnerable if they don't come out the right way. So I do think that this is a game where both teams will definitely, the start is going to be so crucial. I think the Leafs need to, whether they just need to have a bit more, push in their game to start. They were too lackadaisical against Utah. I understand the back-to-back situations and all that, but they've had some time to get themselves acclimatized. Maybe they had a nice day off in Vegas to kind of get themselves ready for this one, but they got to be ready because Vegas.
Yeah, that could be a bad thing too. Having a day off in Vegas, that could go against you. Also,
well, hopefully it was one of those like what happened with Nashville. It's like, well, we had this whole thing planned at the Sphere, but we've been so bad that the team just like that ain't happening. And I'm hoping that within the team itself, it's like, okay, guys, like enjoy your day off, but understand that there's a big game for many reasons, not just because of Mitch Marner, but because of where the team's in a fight for a playoff spot right now.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, like the Maple Leafs just got to continue to stack points and pile up points here as they continue this race in the Atlantic Division. Like these teams aren't losing. Like the Lightning have won 11 in a row. They're up at the top of the charts with 61 points. The Red Wings have won 6 of their last 10, and their second was 60 points. The Montreal Canadiens have won a bunch of games recently. Buffalo is one of the best teams in the NHL right now. I think they've won 14 of their last 16 games, 14-2 since firing their general manager. They've got themselves in a playoff spot. Boston, with a win last night, they've won 4 in a row. They've got themselves in a playoff spot. And then there's Toronto. Like they've won 7 of their last 10. They've played very well since Christmas or the game before that against the Pittsburgh Penguins. But even still, it hasn't been enough to put themselves in a playoff spot because everyone ahead of them continues to win hockey games. It's starting to separate, I would say, between the playoff teams and the non-playoff teams. Like there's no longer, like a 7-point buffer between last place in the East and first place in the East. The Rangers, who stink, are really starting to fall off. The Jackets fired their head coach. The Senators, we'll see what happens with them. But the Maple Leafs themselves, they got to keep winning. They got to keep stacking up points. And I think it's an important game, though, because you look at how they were playing prior to that Utah game. Very impressive hockey. And they won 8 of 10, and they were starting to play with some urgency. Auston Matthews was scoring. The power play really picked up over the course of that 10-game streak there for the Maple Leafs. So they got to get back to that because they lost that in their last game against Utah. I don't want to see a similar performance, a follow-up performance from Utah. That would worry me. That would. Like the one-off game in Utah, like you could call it a scheduled loss if you want, but you could just say like, everyone's going to have a stinker 1 in every 11 games, and that was Toronto's stinker. But you can't follow it up in a big matchup against a big-time opponent, a heavyweight in the West. a team that has, Stanley Cup aspirations. Like this is a more of a litmus test type game for the Maple Leafs. You cannot falter in this one. You've got to show up with the same level of urgency that you did in Colorado, because I think this is just as important as the 2 points and will be just as much of a statement win in Vegas than it was in Colorado. So I really, really think that tonight's game matters for this Maple Leafs team. I think a win would really kind of settle nerves, because I think – after the last game, it's not as though I think it totally washed what they did in the 2 weeks before it, but it did make you wonder, like, okay, well, what is this team now? Was that just a hot stretch, a coach bump by him getting fired, by bringing in Steve Sullivan? Was that just a new coach bump type thing? I think they can kind of squash that hesitance that people have if they can have a big win tonight here.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think it will say a lot about, this team's attitude, right? If they can come out and have, in a lot of ways, people are looking at this as almost like a bit of a defining game, because there are big stakes to it. And, given where and how they've played on the road this year, like this is a game that, I know everyone's going to be like, there shouldn't be so much meaning put towards it, but in a way that there has to be.
Yeah. I mean, they're at a point in the season where, like, you're past the midway mark in the season. Like, when you're playing playoff teams, you got to show up. Like, you got to show up and see what you're all about, see if you can compete with these teams. And the fact that, again, like we mentioned before, you're fighting for a playoff spot. Like, you got to be getting points and picking up points. You got to play well against these guys. Like the Mitch Marner thing aside, you still want to play well against top teams like Vegas and show well and show that, hey, we belong, right? Like that was the conversation after Colorado. Do the Leafs now belong back in that contention conversation? And they followed it up with a bad game against Utah. But if they can bounce back here against Vegas, then it's like, okay, maybe they do belong in that contention conversation, because they've beaten a couple of those behemoths out on the West Coast. So I think it's a very important game for the Maple Leafs. Again, Vegas, they're playing very well right now. It's a team that's won 5 in a row here, and they're always in the mix. And I'll be very keen to see what we see out of Mitch Marner tonight. Should be a very entertaining game. All right, we'll take one more break, Dave. When we come back, it's time for you to unveil your trade list. Trade candidates for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You got a 5-pack, and that's coming up next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The wildcard round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profile profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like. Just open up your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. They'll let you lean the game, your game day instincts, whether you're back of momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. You make your picks and then apply your profit boost to go for after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack for every NFL playoff game today. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti, and we're a few weeks away from the edit. Is there a roster freeze ahead of the Olympic break? There is, right? Yeah. So there's a roster freeze just ahead of the NHL Olympic break, which will be about a 2-week experience, 2-ish week experience within the NHL. Actually, it's close to 3 weeks almost. I think it's like the 5th to the 21st or something like that. So about 2.5, 3 weeks. And it sounds like there could be a bit of a flurry of trades made ahead of that. and then like the actual trade deadline, which obviously is in early March. I think it's like March 7th or 8th, 9th, one of those two. It's the Friday the second Friday of the month in March. But sounds like the Maple Leafs are making calls. Sounds like Brad Treliving is on the horn, making some phone calls and trying to improve his club as much as possible. Yesterday we had talked about the Maple Leafs possibly having interest in Dougie Hamilton, Pierre LeBrun, I guess, reporting that there's interest and there could be a fit there if they can make something work. But Dave, you've got a 5-pack of players that you think would be good fits for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're all blue liners. All blue liners in this pack.
Yeah, we're focusing on the blue line because that's really where the Leafs need. I mean, other than maybe a center, but the biggest pressing need is the blue line. And part of my 5-pack, we already discussed Dougie Hamilton on the last show, so I won't dive too much deeper into that. But that he's among the top on the list because we know that pretty much he's looking for a new spot, and the Leafs need help on the right side. So that's, we talked at length. You can go listen to yesterday's show kind of to get a bit more about that. Then another name that poked around, I think it was David Pagnotta that had reported this, and I think Chris Johnson had also touched on it too. And it was it just feels like every time he's available or there's a way to him to be on the trade block, the Leafs are kind of put in his wheelhouse, and that's Luke Schenn.
Yeah,
it's almost like the annual Luke Schenn's available for a price. And this one, I can understand why it makes sense because the Leafs, frankly, have struggled defending in their own zone, especially in front of the net. And that's something when Luke Schenn was here, he did a good job with that. And we also know that he kind of helped. We always called him the Morgan Rielly whisper because he's probably been one of the better partners that Rielly has had over the last few years. Now, I know that last year when the Leafs had also interest in Schenn, he went to the Jets for a second and a fourth, and I was like, okay, that they did not make this move. Then he signed, and he was still signed to his deal, so there was term on the deal, and I understand like that was part of the reason the package was a little bit more. The Leafs paid a third to Vancouver the last time that they got Luke Schenn. I don't see that being a realistic return for the Jets, mainly because when they have a full healthy complement, Luke Schenn has been a healthy scratch, and he's been seen as a lower role. So this is more about having a better option over Philip Myers at this point. Not about having someone that can play with Morgan Rielly. I mean, in a pinch, if Carlo gets hurt, that would be something you can do. But this is mainly to have somebody who is defensively responsible on that right side that's not named Philip Myers, because those two terms don't exactly go hand in hand right now. So that's kind of why I had Luke Schenn as now. Hopefully, if the price is right as well, like if the Jets are like, oh, we want like a second or third round pick, the Leafs should be like, okay, you can continue having him sit in the press box and see if another team is crazy enough to give you that, because I don't think the Leafs are in that.
No, they absolutely not for a Luke Schenn. Definitely not for Luke Schenn. Maybe for a few other names on your list. Would you like to continue your list of 5 players the Maple Leafs should be targeting ahead of the trade deadline?
Well, the other one, similar vein in terms of an older defenseman's got a lot of skill to his game. Actually, more again, another one of those offensive defensemen that I think the Leafs have really, especially if you want to fix the power play, if you want someone that can help be a good power play specialist too for the team, and also play. He does log quite a few minutes, and that's Justin Falk. The St. Louis Blues are terrible. They're not good. They're skewing younger, which they should be. Like they gave Broberg that long term deal.
He's got 11 goals already this year. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Justin Falk he's well on his way to if he continues on his pace, can establish a new high of goals. And he had 17. Yeah. That was his career high. He's already got 11 in 47 games, which, for a Leafs power play that has not had, and 2 of those have come on the power play. So it's not like he's, just getting them on the power play. The Leafs desperately need somebody that can be a presence on that point at the power play. It can't be Morgan Rielly anymore. I think we're past that point now, and I think Falk can be somebody, considering where the Blues are. Maybe they're willing to move off from him. They should be. We know Doug Armstrong's not afraid to move out players. My concern is just the price that would cost to get him, and if the Leafs even have what the Blues would want. I don't know what that deal, that trade could potentially look like right now, because we haven't really seen what exactly the Blues would be looking. And his cap hits at $6.5 million for this year, and he signed for next year. So that's another part to this. Is are you willing to give a 34-year-old Justin Falk $6.5 million? That's a part of that too.
Yeah, it's for me also age. I think you could throw in there as a concern. 33 years old, and you already have a very veteran blue line. Do you want to add another 33-year-old to the mix? Going to be 34. Come March. So that's what would concern me. I think with adding a Justin Falk, unless you're moving off from somebody, I suppose. But now you're getting and you're adding a guy who's going to be there next year. It's you've seen the wheels fall off, on defensemen pretty quick. Do you want to get yourself into that mix? I think it'd be not expensive, but there'd be a decent price to pay for a Justin Falk with the way that he's playing this season. I would imagine there's going to be teams out there that are willing to pay up for Justin Falk. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the return would have to be for him. Good player, don't get me wrong. Just not at the top of my list, I think. I feel like there's maybe some other guys, if I'm going to spend the assets it would take to get Falk. I think there's a couple other players I would have a little bit more interest in. Who else is on your trade list?
Well, this one here, you and I kind of discussed this player's name. I don't know how likely it is, but the Vancouver Canucks are clearly also another team that's trying to skew a bit younger. Now, they're not going to trade every player that's older, but they do have players that they need to move off. We thought about, would they ever consider moving a Phil Peronic, because you just moved Quinn Hughes.
If they're entering a full scorched rebuild, why not? Exactly. You know what I mean? Why not get whatever you can for your good players? And they just signed him last year, so he got 6 more years left on his contract at a $7.25 cap hit. He's 28 years old. I guess that'll make him 34 when the contract's done. But he still has some years left. He doesn't have we'll call it the weight requirements to be a Toronto Maple Leafs blue liner, which seems if you're not 200 pounds, they're not all that interested. Buck 87 doesn't throw around the weight, as much as maybe Tree Living would like. But he's a very sound defenseman. I think he's sound and he can move the puck. And that's really what the Maple Leafs kind of need. There's guys who can move the puck, right shot, and transport it from the defensive end to the offensive end, play with good connectivity from your defense to your offense, play heavy minutes. So he can kill penalties, can play on the power play if need be. 27 points this year in Vancouver on a team that's not very good. That would be an expensive acquisition, though. That's where you're looking. It's that would cost a lot to bring in a Phil Peronic, I would think.
It's interesting because when they acquired him from the Red Wings, which in a deal that kind of came out of nowhere, they traded a first and a second round pick.
Yeah.
Which I think it was their own second round pick. I think it was the Islanders first.
It was part of the Bo Horvat. It almost a quasi 3-way trade, kind of. They took assets that they got from the Horvat deal and flipped that first pick into Hronek. which has been good for them. He has been good. He's a solid, top 4 defenseman, not top pair guy, but really good. Number 3, we'll call him. He would be a great addition to the Maple Leafs. I think that his skill set would actually flourish here in Toronto. It just comes down to assets. Like, do they have the assets to make something like that happen? Just not sure. I mean, I think the ask would start probably with Easton Cowan. I think that's the start. And then you're going, draft picks, Danford. Like, how much more on top of that are they going to want, right? So
that's what concerns me, because just the Leafs. Anytime we now mention trading draft picks, people are like, we've already done how much of that already?
I know. Well, I mean, this last stretch, does that make it a little more easier to stomach trading picks and prospects, you think? Like, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, like, this team was playing awful. They were terrible. They were outside the playoffs. They were closer to the bottom than they were to the top. And it's like, man, like, how could you possibly entertain trading draft picks at this point to dig yourself out of it? Well, they didn't, and they dug themselves out of it. And now they're, a point out of the playoffs. It's a little more. It's a tad easier to stomach trading off of picks and prospects. Do I still want them to do it for like rentals? No, but a guy like Phil Peronic, who's got 6 more years left on his deal, like, that might be worth it if you're in win now mode, right? Like, Phil Peronic will do more for you today, next year, the year after that than Cowan and Danford will.
Yeah, I do. This the thing is just you're talking about a known commodity that's signed for a long term versus Easton Cowan, who's done well, but he's still a bit of an unknown, right? Like, there's ups and downs that these players go through. Like, it's almost like the Tampa model, right? Where Tampa trades the unknowns and they get guys, but then they get guys that are going to stick around for a while. Right, they sign these guys long-term deals, so that's where you're okay with moving off on these picks, right? And it's worked for them, and that's something the Leafs just have not done a lot of. Like, they talked about Scott Laughton and what they gave up to get him. Well, if the Leafs are able to re-sign Scott Laughton, which sounds like there's interest in doing, then you're fine with the trade because you got something that works for your team more than the unknown of what that first-round pick can be. And it's the first-round pick in 2027, not this year.
Right. You got 2 more players on your trade candidates wish list. Who are they, Dave?
So I'm just on. Let me go through my because Hamilton, Shen, Hronek, Falk. One more actually. And we got to go back. We got to go back to the well. We've talked about this player before. Brad Treliving is never good. It's almost like. You see this one car that you want. I was like, but why don't you consider these cars? Like, no, I want this car. And that's Rasmus Andersson. Like, Rasmus Andersson seems to be the guy that, they talk about the player who got away. If Rasmus Andersson does not end up to be a Leaf, you already know Brad Treliving is just going to be so salty that he wasn't able to get a deal done for him. And I don't know if it's going to happen. From what I'm telling is, like, the Leafs are getting a Calgary tariff tax, if you want to call it that, to make a deal for Rasmus Andersson, and that's frustrated him. And so, and I, to a degree, I understand the optics, but I mean, it should be kind of past it at this point. If the Leafs are giving you a competitive offer, like, that shouldn't make you say, okay, you're going to give us a competitive offer now. We need you to add more because you're Brad Treliving and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, that's my concern I have with this, and it has to be a Rasmus Andersson that comes with not only a contract extension, but people are wondering, is this a Morgan Rielly 2.0 situation with bringing a Rasmus Andersson in? That's been one of the concerns about making the deal for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Rasmus Andersson, I think he's got better defensive numbers than Morgan Rielly, better two-way player than Morgan Rielly. But yeah, it's there's some holes there for sure. But it goes the exact same thing we talked about with Justin Falk or Philip Hronek. The price, like what are the Maple Leafs willing to give up? And for a majority of these players, I guess Luke Shen and Dougie Hamilton aside, and Dougie, it's only because of the contract. Well, ultimately, you're probably looking at giving up one of your top prospects right? Whether that's Cowan or Ben Danford, and then it's plus on top of that, depending on who you're bringing in. And are the Maple Leafs in a spot where they are willing to do this? And I'll be curious. And again, like I said, this 10-game stretch here where they went 8-2, 10 straight games with a point, makes it a little easier to stomach. I think we can all agree with that. Makes it, easier to stomach. But you still want to go to the well again and continue to throw, picks and prospects. And if this team is not ready to contend for a cup, like they can make the playoffs. If you add Anderson, that gives you a little bit of a better chance to make the playoffs. But does that transform you into a cup contender? Does Hronek transform you into a cup contender? Probably not. So I understand both sides of the argument where it's like, you have Nylander, you have Matthews, in their primes. Tavares sounds like he's going downhill. So you want to squeeze, the last season possibly where he still can be a top 6 contributor. You kind of have to be very urgent and push this thing and see if this might be one of their best possible years to get it done. And then you would have to give up assets and picks this year. I don't know. It's interesting where the Maple Leafs are at. It's not a great place to be. I'll say that. No. It's not a great spot where you're kind of in no man's land. We're good enough to make the playoffs, but we don't think we're good enough to really be a Stanley Cup contender. So we're going to invest a little bit, but probably not go all in, and we're going to finish flaming out in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs again. That's what I foresee.
And,
no matter
and potentially have players on expiring deals leave for nothing when maybe you could have used an asset or two to kind of not retool, but maybe take those assets to fulfill a different need you might have.
Ooh, this is a conversation for tomorrow because we got to fly. But you think they'd be willing to listen if they can't come to an agreement with Bobby McMahon pending UFA? Is that a guy who they maybe start to dangle out there as a possible trade chip? That might be a conversation we could have tomorrow, Dave. So we'll put a little pin in that conversation and pick it back up on tomorrow's show. But that'll do it for us here today. Good list, solid list. We'll see if the Maple Leafs acquire any of those players to improve their blue line. That'll do it for us here on the show. Let's thank you all for listening and supporting the podcast. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at _Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Big game tonight. Leafs in Vegas taking on Mitch Marner. Go Leafs, go. Enjoy the game. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.